Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to focus on JavaScript errors, and we're going to talk about how you can throw errors, how we can handle errors in our code, and the error object itself. So to get started, if you can go ahead and go into your project folder, if you can go ahead and go into the 28-errors folder and the start subfolder, if you can open up main.js, and then in your browser, if you can go ahead and open up the index.html page, you should see errors on the web page. So it's important to know error handling in your code is very important. So just like any other programming language, handling errors in JavaScript is really important. And errors can happen to a number of different reasons. There could be errors due to wrong input from the programmer. There could be unhandled errors from clients inputting values into the web page, and we weren't expecting those values as programmers. We could be reaching out to an external source that could throw an error, and we may be expecting it to work at all times. So it's important in our code to catch these errors and handle them, because if we do not, we've seen before where errors will be thrown in the console, and this will break the web application. And generally this is a poor user experience, and we want to handle these errors gracefully and do something with them. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is the try and catch statements. So the try and catch statements in JavaScript are a way for us to specify blocks of code that we want to be tested for errors when it's executed. And if any errors are thrown, we will catch them in our catch statement, and then we can handle that error appropriately. So normally, if we type something that's going to cause an error, the error will be written right to our console. So as an example, I'm going to go ahead and try calling a help function. And then for my help function, I'm just going to go ahead and pass an argument of test. So if we go ahead and save and refresh our page, we see right away an error is thrown to our console. And this error is of the type reference error because help is not defined. And that makes sense because we've not defined this help function anywhere in our code, and this is not a global JavaScript function. So one way to handle this error is we can use the try-catch statements. So to use these statements, we write the keyword try, followed by an open and closing curly. So this represents the code block we want to be ran and tested. Then next, we go ahead and write our catch statement. And then in our catch statement, we provide a parentheses. So this is where we can catch our error. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and call it error. And then we have our opening and closing curlies for the blocks of code that will be executed on this error. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this line of code here. I'm going to place it inside our try block. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a console.log our error object. So now if we save and execute our code, and you'll see right away that we're no longer getting an error in our console. Instead, we're catching our error here in our catch block, and we're handling our error. So right now we're just logging it, and we're not doing anything extra. So you'll see here the full error object gets logged to our console. So as I mentioned, this is a block of code, so we could easily add additional statements, and all of these lines will get executed until an error is thrown. So if we go ahead and do a console log 1, you'll see we have 1, and then our error is thrown. So if we copy this statement here and place it after our help call, what should happen is this should throw an error, and we should immediately jump to our catch statement, and this line of code should never run. So if we go ahead and save and refresh, we'll see that is the case. So that's important to know is when an error is thrown, any lines of code after where that error originated from will not execute. So sometimes it'll be important to have multiple try and catch statements, so that way you can test individual pieces of code if you need to handle them differently. So the next statement I want to take a look at is the finally statement. So the finally statement is a statement that we can add after a try catch, and what the finally statement lets you do is it allows you to execute code regardless of what happens here in our try catch. So if our try executes successfully, our finally statement will still run. If our try and catch runs if our try fails and our catch statement runs, our finally will also execute. So this is useful if you need to do something no matter what happens here. One example is, let's say if we have an open database connection and we query our database in our try statement here and it fails, we'd want to make sure we close that database connection no matter what happens here. So if we're able to query and get our result, we want to close it. If there's an error, we want to handle the error and then close our connection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy this try catch block here. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the finally keyword, followed by our open and closing curlies. And I'm just going to add a console log. And I'm just going to say finally ran. So now if we save and run our code, you'll see that we get our 1, we get our reference error, and then we'll see finally ran. So now if I go ahead and comment out our help code here, and we go ahead and save and refresh, you'll see we have 1, 2, and then finally ran, and our catch did not run.